All right, so this is the introduction video for modules 7 and 8. I'm going to do these modules for women's work-related choices and motherhood together because they hang nicely together. And so if you haven't done the implicit association test, I will ask you to go back and do that now. It's a really cool and important test, I think, to take, and I really hope that you do some thinking about your results and some reflecting. I certainly did. I found my results very interesting. So I want to start with this question that we often hear people ask in our society, which is, can women have it all? And I'm less interested in the answer to that question as I am in answering another question, which is, why are we not also asking, can men have it all? So I think the fact that we are asking the first question, not the latter, is very indicative of our culture and our current culture around women and their work and family-related choices. So before we start thinking about all of the ways that women have made major gains in the workplace and the ways that women are equal, and they certainly have, this is very important, and I will be the first to say that. But before we get there, we need to think about the ways in which policies and workplace structures are still negatively impacting women and their families and the communities that we live in. So, for example, we know that professions where women are more dominant, so thinking about nursing and teaching, these are the professions where people tend to be paid less. And this is an example of society devaluing the kind of work that women do. Not to mention the fact that women who work inside the home are paid nothing. And if we can think about where our world would be if we didn't have anybody who was taking care of things like childcare or making meals, those are the things that our society is really propped up on and also very much devalued monetarily, right? So we should be asking this question of, how does this economic disadvantage impact a woman's choices? Sorry about that noise in the background. How does the economic disadvantage impact a woman's choice to work outside of the home or inside of the home, or to have a family, or to be the primary caregiver? Those are important questions to ask. We also need to be aware that not all women in society have the same privileges and the abilities to make the same choices around work or family. So, for example, if you are a single mother who lives in a low-income household, you are likely not able to make the same choices about whether or not you're going to go to work or not. That choice may just not be available to you. So we need to be careful about how we think and how we talk about choices as we move through these modules. And as we've talked about, so choice is going to be a major theme here. And what I really hope you can do is rethink and reframe how you're thinking about choice, and how these things in the structures in society and policies in society make it more or less likely that people are able to make certain choices. So is a choice really a true free choice, or is it constrained by certain factors in society? And are we talking about those constraints, or are we ignoring them and pretending like they don't exist? And so that brings us to this other thing that I want to touch on, which is post-feminism. And that comes up in our readings in these modules. So what is post-feminism? Post-feminism is this idea that we live in a world that no longer needs feminism or feminist movements, because we have made the progress necessary for men and women to be equal. For example, women now make up 50% of the workforce, and women are able to hold and go into high-paying positions that are in high status. So our job is accomplished, right? And my argument from the readings is that this is a very dangerous rhetoric for a few reasons. And I'm going to talk about these reasons. So one is that work environments are, although women are in the workplace, they very much are, work environments are still not working for many women and families. So our readings for the next couple of weeks will really cover this thoroughly. And also this idea that second wave feminism was really about getting women just into the workplace. Let's just get women into these positions. But we're now realizing that the mistake was that it shouldn't have just been about getting women into the workforce, but about creating workplaces and workspaces where both women and men actually want to work. And in these modules about the workplace and about motherhood, we should be carefully thinking about how structures and policies still don't work for women and families. So the second thing is that post-feminist rhetoric removes the burden of responsibility from society and places it on an individual. So it's saying that because women have ascended to high status and well-paying jobs, and there are certain protections in place that will protect women from sex discrimination. So we've passed some laws and policies that say discrimination is no longer allowed just because that's there, right? And we can essentially say if women are not succeeding under those conditions, then it's their own personal fault that they're failing. And they only have themselves to blame. And so post-feminist rhetoric what kind of subsumes that kind of train of thinking is not helpful to continue to think about how women and families, and men for that matter, struggle in the current work environment. And there still needs to be changes that are made. And so the lesson really is that this is not an issue of individual choice or an individual problem. This is a social dilemma that the government and society needs to address. And so instead of just saying, well, it was her own personal choice, we need to be thinking, what impacted that choice? And how can society together try to address those structures that have become problematic for women and for families? So, for example, we'll look at solutions like temporal flexibility, which you're going to hear about when you listen to the Freakonomics podcast. So temporal flexibility, what is that and how is that a solution? Let you read about that or listen to that. And so thinking about motherhood, switching gears a little bit, as a society, we do very little to highlight the negative consequences of being a stay-at-home mom. Or to the value of the work that people do and people think that women do in the home. So we also think about imagery that comes to mind when we think about working moms. A lot of working moms just look miserable. And we do very little valuing of mothers as individuals themselves. We often always put the value of children and the needs of children above the mother. And that's a societal value, right? And that's something that women, we talked about in things that we internalize, that's something that women very much do internalize. And so for mothers, it's all about sacrificing, making sacrifices for their children, sacrificing their career, sacrificing their time, sacrificing their mental health. And that's a value. And so we're making this claim, right, that this is problematic. And I'm not saying that parenthood isn't about sacrificing. It certainly is about making sacrifices. But why is it that women are expected to make more sacrifices than men are when it comes to families? And also, this thing that becomes very important in Module 8 is this idea that motherhood is surrounded by morality and judgment. So good mothers do X and bad mothers do Y. And mothers almost comes just synonymous with the word women, right? And we talk about motherhood and nurturance like it's something that's inherent to women, when in fact, a lot of women do not have this experience. A lot of women think that there is something wrong with them because of that assumption that motherhood is inherent to women. A lot of women think there's something wrong with them when they don't feel like motherhood comes naturally, or if they don't want to have children. So related to these issues is the issue of miscarriage. So, which is something we as a society do not talk enough about. And part of the reason we don't talk about it is because many women don't want to talk about it. This could be because some women have internalized the message that if they have a miscarriage, there's something inherently wrong with them. When in reality, it's as common as dirt for people to have miscarriages. Women, and so around this, so women should feel free to talk about their experiences with miscarriage however they want to. It's up to you. I'm not saying people should or shouldn't talk about their own experiences. But we do need to consider that we need to be considering if and why women are afraid to talk about miscarriage, and two, how not talking about it makes it more of an isolating experience. And so one of our non-scholarly readings in Module 8 is going to cover that. And let me come down a little bit further. So coming back around to this idea, so motherhood, there's a lot of judgment, and often at the mother's expense, almost always at the mother's expense. And that's not something that's helpful for women, the psychology of women. Also, judgment around women who choose to work. If women were depicting them as people who are working as miserable, women who work can't and have families can't balance the two, and they should really be sacrificing their careers to be with their families. That's not helpful for the psychology and mental state for women. And so coming back to this bigger point of the class, I want you to consider how are these things likely impacting the psychology of women? And so finally, this idea that research has demonstrated that women often acknowledge that there are biases and discrimination and judgment in the workplace and around work and choices around motherhood, but they often do not see how it impacts them personally. So we might see like, yes, this exists out in the world, but I don't see it happening to me. That's what research is showing is happening. So I want us all, both men and women in this class, to think about and be cognizant of how these things are impacting us personally. So just think of examples in your own life if you can. And I will also remind you that under a paradigm shift away from a patriarchal work and family structures and toward a more feminist structure, the argument is that both men and women will benefit. So to just reiterate and reframe, it's not that women will dominate and that men will suffer, or that women will be pushing men out of the workplace, or that women will be making more money than men, or anything like that. It's about finding a system where whole people and whole families and whole communities can feel supported and free to make true free choices that are right for them. And so all that being said, I know this is a longer video, but it's for these two modules. I really hope you enjoy the readings and the podcasts, and I hope that you enjoy the discussion too. All right, take care.